I tried Stoic philosophy for a month, and this is what happened. Do you ever feel like stress and anxiety are just your default setting? For the longest time, I did. It was like this low-grade fever I just couldn't shake. Between the constant pinging of work emails, the pressure to have a perfect social life, and that quiet, gnawing feeling that I was somehow falling behind, I was just overwhelmed. I felt less like the driver of my own life and more like a passenger, getting tossed around by circumstances, by other people's expectations, and by my own chaotic emotions. My days were a blur of reacting. One frustrating comment could ruin my entire morning. A looming deadline would steal any sense of peace. The endless scroll through social media just left me feeling hollow and insecure. I was burning out. And I think a lot of us feel this way, right? We live in a world that's louder, faster, and more demanding than ever. We're constantly bombarded with information, with these curated images of success, and with the message that we should always be doing more, being more. It's exhausting. It leaves you feeling fragile, like one more unexpected problem could make everything just shatter. That's where I was, and I hit a point where I knew something had to change. I started looking for an answer, for some kind of system that could help me build a stronger mind. I wasn't looking for a quick fix. I was looking for a fundamental shift in how I operated. I started digging, and my search led me down this rabbit hole of ancient history and philosophy, where one word kept popping up: Stoicism. It's a philosophy born over 2,000 years ago in Greece and Rome, from thinkers like Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor, Seneca, a famous playwright, and Epictetus, a man born a slave who became one of the most respected teachers of his time. Their laboratory wasn't a university, it was life itself: war, politics, exile, and illness. And through it all, they built a practical guide to living a good life, a life of resilience and purpose, no matter what the world throws at you. And the core idea, it seemed almost too simple. We can't control the chaotic world around us, but we can control our response to it. Our peace of mind doesn't have to be a victim of our circumstances. This idea was so powerful and so completely the opposite of how I was living that I decided to run an experiment. I was going to live like an ancient Stoic for 30 days, and I mean really live it. No half measures. I would immerse myself in their practices, adopt their mindset, and see if this ancient wisdom could actually work in the chaos of the modern world. What I found wasn't just a few clever life hacks for managing stress. It was a shocking revelation about where my anxiety was truly coming from, and it fundamentally changed my perspective on almost everything. This is what happened. The problem: a modern mind in chaos. So before I get into the nuts and bolts of the experiment, let me paint you a picture of the before, because to really get the solution, you have to understand the problem. On the surface, everything looked fine. I had a decent job, good friends, a great family, but internally, it was a different story. My life was basically defined by 3 big struggles. First, there was chronic work stress. My job, like a lot of office jobs, was just a relentless cycle of deadlines, difficult personalities, and that ever-present fear of not being good enough. I'd lie awake at night, my mind racing, not about some huge crisis, but about an email I needed to send, or a slightly critical comment someone made in a meeting. My entire sense of self-worth was tied up in my job performance. A good day at work meant I was on top of the world. A bad day meant I was a complete failure. I was on an emotional roller coaster, and my job had laid all the tracks. I was convinced that my stress was being caused by my work, by my boss, by the deadlines. Second, relationship friction. And I'm not talking about big dramatic fights. I'm talking about the small, everyday stuff. A loved one being in a bad mood would instantly put me in one. A thoughtless comment could send me spiraling for hours. I took everything personally. I thought my happiness depended on everyone around me being happy and acting exactly how I wanted them to. When they didn't, which is all the time, because they're human, I'd feel hurt and powerless. I was basically an emotional mirror, just reflecting back whatever was thrown at me. There was no stable, inner calm. And finally, there was this constant, low-level hum of anxiety about, well, everything. I'd worry about things so far outside of my control it was ridiculous. Global events, politics, what people I barely knew thought of me, a future that hadn't even happened yet. My mind was a non-stop what-if machine, and it was leaving me drained before my day even started. It was like trying to hold back the ocean with a teacup, pointless and totally exhausting. These three things, work stress, relationship friction, and general anxiety, left me feeling brittle, reactive, and just deeply unhappy. I was searching for solid ground in a world that felt like it was constantly shifting under my feet. The how, the rules of the game. So, for 30 days, I decided to go all in. I wasn't just going to read about Stoicism, I was going to live it. I did my research and built a daily protocol based on the core Stoic practices. These were my rules. Rule number 1, and this is the big one, the absolute bedrock of Stoicism, the dichotomy of control. This idea, which comes from Epictetus, is simple. Some things in life are up to us, and some are not. We control our own thoughts, our judgments, our choices. We don't control external events, the weather, the economy, and especially what other people say, think, or do. So for 30 days, my main job was to run every single situation through this filter. When I felt that surge of stress or anger, I had to stop and ask, is this thing upsetting me, in my control, or out of my control? The goal was to pour all my energy into my own actions and practice accepting everything else. Rule number 2, a morning reflection. I stole this one directly from Marcus Aurelius. In his book Meditations, he talks about preparing for the day by reminding himself that he's going to run into difficult people. But the key isn't the negative prediction, it's the follow-up. He reminds himself that he can't let their actions corrupt his own character. So every morning, I'd spend 5 minutes thinking about the day ahead and setting my intention. Today, I will focus only on what is in my control. I will act with integrity. I will not be thrown off by external chaos. It's all about setting your mental compass for the day before you walk out the door. Rule 3 sounds a little grim, but stick with me. It's called premeditatio malorum, or the premeditation of bad things. Instead of just hoping for the best, you actively imagine things going wrong. You visualize missing your flight, getting into an argument, or facing criticism. The point isn't to be negative, it's to rehearse your response so you're not shocked when things go sideways. Think of it like a fire drill for your emotions. When the real alarm rings, you know what to do, and you can respond calmly instead of panicking. Rule number 4 was my evening Stoic journal. This one was inspired by Seneca. At the end of each day, I'd ask myself, what bad habit did I work on today? What mistake did I resist? How am I better? I'd write down a challenge I faced, analyze my reaction, and ask, did I focus on what I could control? How could I handle that better next time? This wasn't about beating myself up. It was about objective self-review, aiming for progress, not perfection. And finally, Rule 5 was to live by the 4 Stoic virtues: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. Wisdom was about seeing things clearly, without my emotional baggage. Courage was about facing the tough stuff I'd normally avoid. Justice was about treating people fairly, even when I was frustrated. And temperance was about self-control, especially over my own flashes of anger or impatience. These became my North Star. These 5 practices were the blueprint for my 30-day experiment. It felt a little ambitious, even artificial at first, but I was ready to see it through. The journey. The 30 days. Week 1. The awkward beginning. Okay, the first week was a mess, honestly. Trying to force these ancient habits into my fast-paced life felt clunky and weird. My morning reflections felt like I was just reading from a script, and imagining things going wrong just made me more anxious. My brain, so used to its old habits, was fighting me every step of the way. I remember this one moment perfectly. It's day 3, and I'm stuck in traffic, already late for a meeting. The old me would be white-knuckling the steering wheel, heart pounding, cursing everyone. The new Stoic me tried to step in. I took a breath and said to myself, "The traffic is not in your control. Your reaction is." It sounded nice, but my body wasn't buying it. I was still tense, still furious. I just felt like a total fraud, like I was just slapping a philosophical bumper sticker on a car that was on fire. The evening journal was the hardest part. Day after day, I had to write down all my failures. Got angry at my partner over nothing. Wasted an hour worrying about a project's outcome instead of just doing the work. Complained about my boss again. It was a humbling list of my own mental shortcomings. By the end of that first week, I was ready to quit. This wasn't working. It was just making me feel worse. But I had promised myself 30 days, so I kept going. Week 2, the first glimmer of hope. Then, in week 2, something started to shift. It wasn't a lightning bolt moment. It was small. The practices started to feel less like a chore and more like a tool. One afternoon, I got a blunt, critical email from a senior colleague. My immediate gut reaction was that hot flash of shame and defensiveness. My fingers were hovering over the keyboard, ready to fire back a long, justifying reply. But then, this new thought, this little voice I'd been trying to cultivate it, cut through the noise. His opinion is not in your control. The quality of your work is. Your response is. I stopped. I reread his email, and instead of focusing on the harsh tone, I looked for the actual feedback. And I had to admit he was right. So I took an hour, fixed the issue, and sent back a simple reply. "Thanks for the feedback. You were right. I've updated it. Let me know if you see anything else." The response I got back was, "Much better, thanks." That was it. No drama, no emotional hangover. I hadn't spent the rest of the day replaying it in my head. I had taken something that would have previously wrecked my day and turned it into a productive, emotion-free fix. It was a game changer. The power wasn't in pretending not to feel the sting of criticism. It was in choosing not to let that sting dictate what I did next. Week 3, the big test. And then week 3 rolled around, and it brought the final exam for my little experiment. It was a high-stakes project meeting, and tensions were already high. When a huge error was discovered, the blame game started instantly. One manager, known for his aggressive style, pointed the finger directly at my team and at me. In the past, this would have been my worst nightmare. My face would have flushed, and I'd have either shut down or gotten defensive. The room went silent. All eyes were on me. I could feel that familiar surge of adrenaline, that fight-or-flight instinct screaming at me to protect my ego. But this time, all that practice kicked in. It really was like muscle memory. I thought of my morning reflection. I thought of the premeditatio malorum. I had actually visualized this exact scenario. And I thought of the 4 virtues. I took a slow, deliberate breath. "You're right to be concerned," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "This is a serious issue." I didn't accept blame, but I didn't deflect it either. I validated his concern and steered the conversation towards a solution. Right now, finding fault isn't as important as finding a fix. Let's walk through the process and see where the breakdown happened. Then we can make sure it doesn't happen again. The energy in the room completely shifted. The tension broke. By refusing to get pulled into a fight, I had de-escalated the whole thing. We spent the next hour actually solving the problem. Later that day, the same manager came by my desk and apologized for his tone. Walking home that evening, I felt more than just relief. I felt like something inside me had fundamentally clicked into place. I had faced my biggest professional fear and not only survived, but thrived. That was the moment Stoicism stopped being an experiment and started becoming a part of how I operate. Week 4. A new normal. By the final week, things felt different. The practices weren't a checklist anymore. They were just part of my day. The morning reflection was a grounding ritual. The dichotomy of control was becoming my default mental filter. Journaling was no longer a list of my failures, but a tool for getting better. I started noticing subtle changes everywhere. I was more present in conversations because I wasn't constantly worrying about what the other person thought of me. I was more patient with my family, recognizing that their moods were their own, not a reflection on me. I felt this quiet confidence that wasn't based on praise or success, but on the inner knowledge that I could handle whatever the day threw at me. Life hadn't gotten any easier. The deadlines were still there. People were still unpredictable, but my ability to deal with it all had grown immensely. I was building what Seneca called an inner citadel, a fortress of the mind that external chaos couldn't touch. The reveal, the results, and surprising discoveries. So, after 30 days of this, what was the final verdict? Was it worth all the effort? Absolutely. The changes were more profound than I ever could have imagined. But my biggest takeaways came in the form of 3 surprising discoveries. Discovery number 1, my stress wasn't coming from the outside. It was an inside job. This was the biggest bombshell for me. For years, I believed my stress was caused by my job, by other people, by the world. I was a victim of these external forces. But this experiment taught me that I was wrong. My stress wasn't being caused by the bad thing that happened. It was caused by my judgment about the bad thing. The Stoics teach that events themselves aren't good or bad. It's our opinion about them that makes them so. A difficult colleague isn't inherently stressful. My belief that he shouldn't be difficult was the source of the stress. A tight deadline wasn't the problem. My fear of failing was the problem, and that was so freeing, because if I was the source of my stress, that meant I could be the source of my peace. Discovery number 2. The pause is an absolute superpower. Before this, my life was just stimulus and immediate reaction. Someone says something rude, I feel angry. An email lands, I feel anxious. I lived with zero space between the event and my response. Stoicism taught me to create that space. By simply inserting a moment of thought before I reacted, a moment to ask, is this in my control? I could change everything. That little gap, that pause, that's where you take your power back. It's the space where you decide who you're going to be. Are you going to be a slave to your impulses, or are you going to be a person who acts on their values? This didn't just reduce my stress. It made me a better colleague, a better partner, and a more thoughtful person. It felt like discovering a superpower I had all along, but never knew how to use. Discovery number 3. True happiness isn't about feeling good. It's about doing good. Our culture tells us happiness is about feeling pleasure and avoiding pain. I thought the point of this was to eliminate negative emotions and just feel good all the time. But the Stoics see it differently. They have this idea called eudaimonia, which doesn't mean happiness in a laughing on a beach kind of way. It's closer to flourishing. For them, flourishing comes from living a life of virtue and purpose. It comes from doing the right thing. And the moments I felt the most deeply content this month weren't when things were easy. They were after that difficult meeting, or after having a patient conversation when I really felt like being angry. The satisfaction came from acting well, not just feeling good. I realized that happiness isn't some prize you win, it's a byproduct. It's what happens when you live a life you're proud of. Conclusion. So, the 30 days are over, but I can tell you this experiment is not. I'm not a perfect Stoic. I still get frustrated. I still worry about things I shouldn't. The difference is, now I have a toolkit. I have a playbook for navigating the messy, unpredictable parts of life with a little more grace. Stoicism didn't get rid of my problems. It changed my relationship with my problems. It taught me that while I can't control the world, I can control the one thing that truly matters, my own mind. I feel less like a leaf getting tossed around in the wind and more like a tree rooted in my own values, able to bend in a storm without breaking. This 2000-year-old philosophy is, without a doubt, the most practical and life-changing tool I've ever found for navigating the modern world. It gave me a sense of peace and control I honestly didn't think was possible. But that was my journey. Now I want to hear from you. I really want to know what you think. Have you ever tried applying any of these ideas in your own life? What's one idea from this that sticks with you? Drop a comment below. I read all of them, and I'd love to get this conversation started. And if you're interested in more practical philosophy for a better life, make sure to subscribe, because we're just getting started. Thanks for watching.